The reason why Rey is the greatest Jedi of all time, the reason why she is the most powerful Force user of all time, is because Rey doesn't need any training. And we've seen this before. We've seen another fictional character just inherently be this powerful. Frieza from Dragon Ball Z. You see, Frieza never trained. Never trained. He was just always the most powerful being in all of the universe, right? That is until Goku showed up. And then when he lost to Goku and Vegeta, he decided to train, right? He came back to life. He decided to train for a little bit. He only trained for a few months. And then he became Golden Frieza. You see, Rey is the Frieza of Star Wars. That is why she is this powerful. She doesn't need to train. But when she does, again, after The Force Awakens, she trained for a few months with Luke Skywalker, then she trained for a few other, for like a year or something with Leia. After just a brief amount of training, she was able to defeat Darth Sidious himself, the most powerful Sith to ever exist. And according to this dog shit of a movie, The Last Sith, the greatest Sith, she was able to defeat him again. She only had a few years of training, but that's all Rey needs. Because again, Rey is the Frieza of Star Wars. Rey doesn't need training. She is just powerful, and you need to accept that.
So after driving men out of society, what did people think would happen? After women saying something like the future is female, and turning every popular franchise in the movie industry into a feminist hellhole, what were they expecting? Okay? After every political movement and screaming, feminists in the streets talking about how unfair because of the patriarchy and shit like that, what were they expecting men to do? Do they not know who built society? What is up, guys? It's your boy Andy Matrix. I'm back with another video. If you haven't heard of me, make sure to follow me on Andy Matrix Gaming. I talk about anime, gaming, Japanese culture. Check that out. And if I'm trying to reach 3,000 subscribers, you want to help me out with that, click the link in the description. Guys, make sure to follow Angry Guy on Rumble, because YouTube has become the censor station and Rumble has more freedom. Angry Guy is uploading new videos up there that are not allowed on YouTube. Click the link in the description to check that out. And everybody, the economy has collapsed. It has already collapsed, with millions and millions of people losing their jobs and unable to find another one. We are being pushed to the edge, and we are being pushed into a corner to the point where we can no longer rely on a 9-to-5. If you can't even find a 9-to-5 nowadays. And what better way to survive than to start your own side hustle when there's no other choice? Angry Guy recommends the Angry Guy Content Creator Academy, where you can learn how to build your own brand and build an audience and generate income for yourself online. Check out the Angry Guy Content Creator Academy. Click the link below to learn more. And let's get on with the video. Yeah. So, in the past 15 years, everything has been geared towards women. Cartoons, movies, video games, and our favorite franchises like Star Wars were ruined after the future became female. Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? After the future became female, Star Wars became less popular. God, I wonder. I wonder why. How come something that was usually meant for boys, how come all of a sudden after it became female, it just fell apart? What happened? They even brought this borderline retarded behavior into Christianity by saying that God is female when the Bible clearly refers to God as male. Everything these crazy people touch turns to shit. But today we have Far From Eden covering this topic, so here we go.
And kind of fudge the rules to get their way to the outcome that they want. And that's whether or not you accept that's true of men and women in general. Certainly in this case, the women ignored the off-the-record rule, took Larry Summers' quotes to a feminist journalist, and stirred this up into a massive national scandal.
Okay, so that's the president of Harvard. He said, do you want the nice version or do you want the, academic happy version? And all he did was say, hey, women are more likely to have conflict in the ways that they, it's going to tell you, I think. So she's better off to say it. It was basically all the things that it was more about, It was more about the sciences and would they be likely to go into science? Why are they underrepresented in science, right? It's because, well, they don't want to do it and they don't have the aptitude. It was supposed to be off the record, but it wasn't. And all that's true. And we know it's true. And maybe it's why it inflames us so badly. How dare you, right? But it's true. And it's exactly what Jordan Peterson said when he was first rising to fame and popularity. And it was controversial then too. This guy said this in 2005. And I think there's a reason. I've never heard of him. They got to shut all this down. She talked about, well, who shuts people up in conflict? Who says, no, you can't say that? It's wokeism. But also, who's done it in your life to you? Who won't engage in the argument, but will just call you a narcissist or an abuser or this, that, or the other? You disrespected me. There, you're caught up.
And the thing that was so dismaying for those of us who remember watching it unfold at the time is that these women who were trying to get Larry Summers fired, and as they eventually did not offer any arguments. They did not try and say that what Larry Summers said was wrong on the facts. What they said in the quotes that they gave to the New York Times was, I was so offended I couldn't even breathe. I had to leave or I would have passed out. And I'm sitting there thinking, you're not really beating the allegations that you're emotional rather than rational, ladies. Feminist hysteria managed to unseat one of the most powerful people in the United States from one of the most valuable positions simply on the basis of being offended without even trying to argue that what he had said was wrong.
So by that,
they'll divorce you over that and say it's your fault.
And this is the power of believe all women. No matter what she does, no matter what she says, we have to believe her. We have to believe her when she says, that somebody did whatever to her. And when these chicks they put these allegations out there, it's like they want people to just do what they say, don't question anything, don't do anything, right? But when the female is the one that's at fault, it's like, oh, how come how come people are not doing proper research? Nobody's listening to me. Well, when it's the man's fault in America, nobody listens to the man. The guy's literally at the mercy of the female in the courts. I mean, like a lot of feminists have taken down innocent men time and time again. I remember there was a football player that got accused of the R word, what you call it, taking advantage of somebody, right? The R word. And it turns out to be this girl, this college girl. And I think he was in jail for like 5 years before they found out that he was innocent. Can you imagine that? You go to jail first, and then 5 years later they find out that he was innocent. They had to pay. I think they had to pay this guy like a lot of money, for the inconvenience. But yeah, that is the power of believe all women. Go figure.
You said something true. You had a disagreement. Well, I can't even believe you're like that.
account, the ousting of Larry Summers was a sort of early example of this. Not only was it about the differences between men and women, it epitomized the differences between men and women. But I just got to push back a little bit, I feel, on behalf of those of our listeners who might be not enjoying this. First of all, are you sure that they were all women involved in the ousting of Larry Summers? I feel like if you did a full forensic study, there's bound to be some blokes involved in that story.
Yes, and in fact, there is a journalist, I believe, named Richard Bradley, who wrote a book about Larry Summers' tenure as president of Harvard. And it is important to state for the record that over 1 year elapsed between the speech he gave that got him in so much trouble and his eventual resignation. It is also important to stipulate that there were many, many other controversies that Larry Summers got himself into in the course of his Harvard presidency. He antagonized powerful members of the faculty. He antagonized the Black Studies department and kind of put his foot in it politically there as well, and made various budget changes that people didn't like. Larry Summers, if you don't know him,
right,
he's famously a guy who's pretty brash and blunt and not in it. He's not here to make friends.
Yeah, but is that a feminized way to look at it? Or is that what a guy does who thought, I'm going to clean house at Harvard? Maybe he saw wokeism coming. I'm just saying, I'm giving the other side of it. Because it sounds like it to me. Sounds like to me he was onto a lot of truth. And I'm not going to address some of the things she said that he did, because I have thoughts on that too. But I'm going to keep that for locals. Yeah. Yeah, of course. Of course. I'm surprised that they didn't set him up in some kind of a, scandal, a fake scandal, something like that, Anyway.
And there have been tons of men that have been, that have fallen victim to this Bolivar women crap, right? And just the privilege of the female gender in America, all the power that has been given to one gender in America and Western countries in general, right? Really, Western countries, Canada's very feminist. I think France and the UK, they're very feminist. Right, and people wonder why men don't want to get married, why men don't want to approach this and that, why the birth rate is falling down. Man, who the heck wants to have kids with these females? It's like nowadays marriage is a scam. I mean, a lot of politicians are trying to reverse, all the laws of marriage, like alimony, child support, and all that stuff, because that's the reason why a lot of dudes just don't want to get married, because they don't want to fall victim to one of these accusations, or find out that the child that they supposedly had with this woman, is his child, when really it was, somebody else that busted her down before you came in. I'm sorry, that sounded funny. But yeah, and as the economy is falling, and we're losing millions of jobs, and people are having a hard time finding work. And, after getting laid off, they can't find a job. Especially, there's a lot of females out there. You go on TikTok, and there's a lot of these screaming females saying, oh, my God, I lost my job. I can't pay my bills. Right? So if you want to survive, in these hard times, one of the best ways is really just to be independent of a job. Because if you can't find one, you're going to have to, find a way to, fend for yourself. And what better way than to own your own online business, which is why Angry Guy created the Angry Content Creator Academy, where you're going to learn how to build an audience online, how to create videos to build an audience, basically digital marketing, right? And most importantly, creating a digital product so you can start generating revenue and start becoming independent of a 9-to-5, because 9-to-5s are pretty much, they're on their way out. They're on the way out, and UBI is coming in. So guys, click the link in the description to check out the Content Creator Academy by the Angry Guy and start learning today how to, run your own business from the internet. There's many ways of doing it, and it's gotten easier and easier and easier over the years. And just see this as a shortcut to learn, instead of taking like now there's like a bachelor's degree to get a bachelor's degree in digital marketing. Well, here, this is not going to cost. You're not going to have to get into student loan debt to learn that shit. Much more affordable by the Angry Guy. So click the link in the description. Check out the Content Creator Academy. And let's go ahead and continue on with the video.
They will remove people. They're not having as much luck at it now, though, because many of us are sick and tired of being called names, and it doesn't shut us up anymore.
Larry Summers is. So certainly there were many controversies that led to his eventual resignation. He was not fired, he resigned. But I think a fair assessment would say that the remarks about women in science were the straw that broke the camel's back. If you had to name one thing that caused his resignation, that would be the one thing people would pick.
I said that some people were upset by your essay. One such person was Kathy Young over at the Bullock. We haven't asked her on the show, so let me read out some of her remarks and you can respond to them. She says, Andrews has waded into this morass with an ultra-simplistic message for those on the right. Everything they hate in modern American culture can be blamed on women, or at least on women's social and political empowerment and their large-scale entry into public life. That message seems to be quite popular. Andrews' talk was reportedly the big hit of NatCon. You did a speech kind of version of this at the National Conservatism Conference, and the video got 170,000 views. So she's saying you're just bashing on, you're beating up on women, you're blaming women for everything that's wrong with the world, and it's a cheap shot and it's not fair, and she doesn't recognize it, and she's pissed. What do you say to Kathy?
Kathy Young has become one of my most dedicated haters. Anytime I write anything, controversial or otherwise, she tends to pop up from the lob peanuts from the cheap seats. So, hi, Kathy. Thank you for being my most dedicated reader. In terms of the substance of her argument, I think the most important response I would give is this. Other people who are skeptical of feminism, going back all the way to Phyllis Schlafly, took gender differences as their starting point and then asked, given that these are the differences between men and women, what are likely to be the changes in our institutions? How is this likely to play out if institutions tip to being majority female? The important thing about the article I wrote and the position I am taking is that I did not take gender differences as my starting point. I began with the observation that our institutions changed radically in 2020. Wokeness really did mark a significant departure in how our institutions function.
Awesome. She's so smart. She's like, I didn't start out that way. So you can't, it's harder to attack, right? She started out with, hey, look at these changes over here, which you kind of have to agree with. She started out with a point that you have to agree with. This lady is smart. And she's on our side. I'm so excited.
So given this huge, unprecedented, otherwise inexplicable, massive social change called wokeness,
Right.
what could possibly be the explanation for that?
Right.
So I didn't start with gender differences and saying men and women are different, therefore I think more ladies is going to be a disaster. I started with observing a disaster and asking what could possibly explain it. And I think that the most simple explanation is feminization.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and you come up with some quite convincing dates here. Law schools became majority female in 2016. The New York Times, as you mentioned, became majority female in 2018. Medical schools became majority female in 2019. And overall, the college-educated workforce became majority female in 2019.
Wow.
A lot of people, I think, women or men, would hear those statistics and feel like that was something to celebrate. They might say, okay, maybe the way that these institutions work has changed. Maybe there are some negative aspects to that. But overall, it's a positive because it means greater participation. It means they will reflect the communities they're serving better, etc. You know what the arguments are. Do you also see some positives in the additional presence of women in the workplace?
No, it depends on the field. I think there are some fields that are very much enhanced by female representation. I am basing my judgments of whether increasing feminization is a good thing or a bad thing based not on speculation about how I think women tend to be, but on observation about how increasing feminization has affected these institutions so far. In the case of the field of law, that is one area where I see the areas of law that are most female dominated, including law revolving around sexual assault and the Me Too movement. And in the case of campus courts to adjudicate cases of sexual assault, the so-called Title IX courts that arose under President Obama, that is kind of a sort of perfect experiment. That's a legal system designed by women according to feminist principles. And I observe how those courts played out in practice. And I think, well, gosh, these Title IX courts for sexual assault on college campuses were just railroading a lot of innocent guys who got caught up in ambiguous situations. So there were many injustices committed.
And they took those cases that a lot of times were just false and they put them all out in the media so that other women would think like that and think that was the case and think, oh yeah, that's how men are. So it had even greater implications than the people who were involved in it.
By these courts, they don't seem to have the safeguards that I think are really important. These were courts designed to believe women and protect women, and yet they tended to do more harm than good. And then during the Me Too movement, what we saw, certainly in America, was many of those same legal principles and habits from the campus courts that existed on universities being applied to actual legal cases of sexual assault prosecutions in the real grown-up courts, things like the Harvey Weinstein trial and all the rest of it. And there was a tendency in those Me Too cases, certainly in how they were covered in the press, and even a little bit how they were dealt with in courts of law.
Harvey Weinstein's innocent, by the way. He's an immoral man. He's an adulterer, but he's innocent. He's factually innocent.
And you know what? She could be right, Harvey Weinstein. And I'm not saying that I'm a fan of Harvey Weinstein. I'm not I'm not a fan of that guy. But the problem with Harvey Weinstein is that he was a man with money. He was a man with money. He was surrounded by all these females, and he thought he had a lot of power. And of course, a lot of these female predators, like these these women that like to take advantage of men, they go after powerful men. They go after men with a lot of money, powerful men. And it's easy to take them down because all they got to do is say, oh, well, he touched me inappropriately. And then the American court is going to be like, well, better buckle up, buddy, because you're going to pay her a lot of money. And that's all it takes. That's all it takes. And then, of course, he shows up on the news. Everybody knows what he did or what they're saying that he did. And like I said, he was just the perfect target for some of these women because he was immoral. He was, kind of a scumbag. And all they got to do, because a lot of people already knew that he was kind of like, a sketchy type of dude. So they were like, all right, I'm just going to use this guy, say that he touched me inappropriately, report him, and then I'll just get a lot of money, and then that's it. Everybody thinks he's an a-hole anyways, so why not?
We have lost something if history departments become feminized, when parliamentary debate becomes feminized, when all of these things become feminized.
Especially because they don't teach real history. They don't teach the real history of feminism. They don't teach that. They teach the kids that matriarchal societies in the past flourished and were successful. They really do.
The institutions just don't work as well.
The big question, I think, Helen Andrews, and the one I want to conclude with is, what do we do about it? So let's just say we're with you on the proposition that you observe this shift. If you want to get back to a more rational or different way of being, I guess there are two options. One is that you reverse the great feminization and you start excluding or aiming to weight down the number of women in key positions in key institutions. I can't see that being a very popular option, but there must be one. Or I suppose you have to insist that the women that do take part in those institutions can play by the old rules and stick to, what you would call more masculine ways of being. Are they the two options as you see it? And if so, which do you prefer?
No, I have a third option, which I will propose in a moment. But just to address the option number 2 there, that is one that is very attractive to a lot of people. You say, okay, feminization is bad, but we'll just tell all the ladies that they have to keep playing by the old rules. That is not a viable solution.
It's not going to work.
Because if you have a legal profession that is 60% male, then you can insist that the 40% play by your old rules. But once women are 60% of the legal profession, you can try and say, we need to stick to the old rules.
No.
But if they're the demographic majority, they're just going to say, no, we're going to change the rules to what we prefer.
And if the women are raising the men, the boys and everything, and they're in charge of the raising, those men in particular will be more feminized themselves. They will interact with the world a little bit more the way women do.
And that is why we have so many soy boys in our society. Just like she said, we have a lot of women in the, we have 60% of women in politics. And, they're raising young men, they have children, they're raising young men, and those men grow up to see how their mothers are the leaders. And then what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen? They're going to grow up with the same mentality, with the what's the word I'm looking for? I guess like a female type of brain. That's how they're going to be raised. That's what's going to happen. They're going to go into society with that type of mentality, and then it becomes really difficult to change things. And the only thing left is just a complete collapse. Right? That's what's going to happen. That's exactly what's going to happen. And now that we are here, a lot of them cannot see the real cause of the problems. A lot of them cannot see that they, because they relied on the government so much, now they're running back to men and saying, hey, oh my God, like I need help. We see it on social media. They wanted to be independent, but now that, now when things get hard, oh shit, I don't want to be independent anymore. So for girls, being independent, it's only good to be independent as a female when everything is nice and dandy, when the sun is shining. But as soon as it gets dark and cloudy and it starts to rain, they go into hiding. I hate to say it that way, but it's true, man. It's true. But anyways, whatever your thoughts are, make sure to comment below. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for future notifications. Guys, it's your boy Andy Matrix. Godspeed.